Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. My name is Edwin Bicaros, Krimto from Block B. From Block B. Our topic today is theories of crime causation. First topic is classical theories of crime causation. Under the classical theories of crime causation is rational choice theory. Rational choice theory states that individuals are use calculation to make rational choices and achieve outcomes that are aligned with their own personal objectives. These results are also associated with the maximizing an individual's self-interest. Using rational choice theory is expected to result in outcomes that provide people with the greatest benefit and satisfaction given the limited option of they have available. Adam Smith was one of the first economists to develop the underlying principle of rational choice theory. Routine activity theory. Routine activity theory is a subfield of crime opportunity theory that focuses on situations of crimes. The theory has been extensively applied and has become one of the most cited theories in criminology. Routine activity theory has its foundation in human ecology. Over time, the theory has been extensively employed in the study of sexual crime, robberies, cybercrimes, residential burglary, and corresponding victimizations, among others. It is also worth noting that in the study of criminal victimization. Lifestyle theory. Lifestyle theory asserts that crime is both a propensity and developmental process and that the career criminal and criminal career paradigms, rather than being diametrical opposed, are actually complementary. Lifestyle theory holds that crimes is a developmental process guided by an ongoing interaction between the three variables: incentive, opportunity, and choice. The lifestyle exposure theory was developed by Hindi Young, Gottfriedson, and Garofalo. General deterrence and specific deterrence theory. General deterrence refers to the effects of legal punishment on the legal public, potential offenders, and specific deterrence refer to the effect of legal punishment on those individuals who actually undergo the punishment. General deterrence can be defined as the impact of the threat of legal punishment on the public at large. Specific deterrence can be seen as the impact on actual legal punishment on those who are apprehended. General deterrence results from the perception of the public that traffic laws are enforced and that there is a risk of detention and punishment when the traffic laws are violated. Specific deterrence results from actual experiences with detention, prosecution, and punishment of the offenders. Two utilitarian philosophers of 18th century, Cesare Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham, formulated the deterrence theory as both as explanation of crimes and the methods of endorsing it. Victim precipitation theory. Victim precipitation is a criminology theory that analyzes how a victim interaction with an offender may contribute to the crime being committed. The theory is the most commonly associated with crime like homicide, rape, assault, or robbery. Victim precipitation theory also relates to the interaction that make a victim susceptible to crime. This application of theory is known as victim facilitation, and its concerned situation there where victims' negligence or carelessness make them more vulnerable of criminal conduct. Wolfgang describes the victim as the first in the homicide drama to use physical force against his subsequent slayer. Incapacitation theory. Last, incapacitation theory argues that reduction in crime rates are achieved through higher imprisonment rates since the offender cannot commit new crimes. While incarcerated, the theory is a premise on the existence of the small but identifiable number of offenders who can be imprisoned and isolated from the rest of society. The success of the incapacitation theory remains a question for consideration, while advocates of the theory notes decrease crime rates generally follow increased imprisonment rates. The reasons behind fluctuations in crime rates are unknown. The second topic is the psychological theories of crime causation. Under it is the psychodynamic theory and the psychosexual states of human development. Psychodynamic theory, also known as psychoanalytic psychotherapy, help clients understand their emotions and unconscious pattern of behavior. By talking through these emotions and behaviors with a social worker, clients come to know themselves better and make better decisions for themselves. Freud believed that personality developed through a series of childhood stages in which pleasure-seeking energies from the id become focused on certain inner erogenous areas. Freud proposed that personality developed in childhood takes place during 5 psychosexual stages, which are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. During each stage, sexual energy, libido expressed in different ways and through different parts of the body. Behavioral theory. Behaviorism or a behavioral learning theory is a popular concept that focuses on how students learn. This learning theory states that behaviors are learned from the environment and says that innate or inherited factors have very little influence on behavior. Watson and Skinner believed that if they were given a group of infants, the way they were raised and the environment they put them in would be the ultimate determining factors for how they act, not their parents or their genetics. A group of dogs would hear a bell ring and then we will be given food. After enough time, when the bell would ring, the dogs would be salivate, expecting the food before these even saw it. This is exactly the behaviorism argues that the things we experience and our environment are the drivers of how we act. Social learning theory. Social learning theory is the idea that the children learn from the observing others. This learning can be acted on. A child sees a sibling politely ask for a treat and get one, or not acted on. A teenager hears a friend talking, picking a lock, and they learn something new. But don't try it themselves, especially when it comes to aggressive behavior. Social learning theories plays a big role in how all people and especially children learn. 4 elements of social learning theory. Attention. Children can learn if they aren't focused on the task. Students who see something unique or different are more likely on focus on it, helping them to learn. Retention. People learn by internalizing information. We can then recall the information later when we want to respond to the situation in the same way which we saw. In order to learn from what we say, we have to retain that information. Reproduction. We reproduce our previously learned behavior or knowledge when it's required. Practicing our response in our head or in the action can improve the way we respond. Motivation. Motivation is required in order to do anything. Usually our motivation comes from seeing someone else be rewarded or punished for something they have done. They can motivate us to do or not to the same thing. Cognitive theory. This theory on cognition asks learner to look at thinking and mental processes and how cognitive thinking can be influenced by internal and external factors. If your cognitive processes are working normally, it's easier to learn. But if something is off with the cognitive process, difficulties can ensue. Cognitive learning can be broken down into social cognitive theory and cognitive behavioral theory. Plato and Descartes are two of the first philosophers to dive deeply into the theory of cognitive behavior and knowledge. Moral development theory. Colbert's theory of moral development is a theory that focuses on how children develop morality and moral reasoning. Colbert's theory suggests that moral development occurs in a series of six stages. The theory also suggests that moral logic is primarily focused on seeing the maintaining justice. Piaget's moral development refers to the process through which children develop the standards of right or wrong within their society. Based on social and cultural norms and laws, Piaget conceptualized moral development as a constructivist process whereby the interplay of action and thought builds moral concept. Intergenerational transmission theory. Intergenerational transmission refers to the transfer of individual abilities, traits, behaviors, and outcomes from parents to their children. An example of intergenerational is a household where a great-grandmother and grandmother, parents, and the child all live together. Alternative theory, a set of statements or a principle device to explain a group of fact phenomena, especially one that has been repeatedly tested or is widely accepted and can be used to make prediction about natural phenomena. The branch of a science or art consisting of its explanatory statements, accepted principle and methods of analysis, as opposed to practice, a fine musician who had never studied theory. A set of theorism that constitute a systematic view of branch of mathematics. Abstract reasoning, speculation, a decision based on experience rather than theory. A belief or principle that guides action or assists a comprehension or judgment. Stake out the house on the theory that criminals usually return to the scene of crime. Differential association reinforcement theory. Differential association reinforcement theory was created in 1966 by Ronald Akers and Robert Burgess. The theory is a combination of Skinnerism, behaviorism, social learning theories, and the differential association theory, created by Edwin Sutherland. The theory explains that criminal behavior is learned by the reinforcement we receive after committing deviant behavior. We also learn behavior by watching others commit criminal act and reinforcement they receive. Whether or not the individual will continue commit crimes depends on the past, present, and future rewards as well the anticipated punishments. A6 conditioning theory. A6 theory argues strongly that biological predispositions toward certain personality traits combined with conditioning and socialization during childhood in order to create our personality. In6 Personality Theory, 1967-1997, describes three broad personality factors. These are extraversion, introversion, neuroticism, ego stability. Next, integrated theory. Integrated theories of crime represent an attempt to bridge an ideological differences that exist among various older theories of crime by integrating variables from disparate theoretical approaches. An integrated approach recognizes that crime is a complex, multidimensional phenomenon with multiple causes. In 1979, Delbert Elliott and his colleagues proposed one of the most widely recognized integrated theories, Elliott, Agiton, and Carter, 1979. Borrowing concept from strange social learning and social control theories, they proposed the individuals follow one of the two pathways into delinquency. Maternal deprivation and attachment theory. Maternal deprivation is a scientific term summarizing the early work of psychiatrist and the psychoanalyst John Bowlby on the effect of the separating infants and young children from their mother, although the effect of loss of the mother on the developing child had been considered earlier by Freud and other theorists. The third topic is a sociological theories of crime causation. First is organization theory. The social organization Disorganization theory is a theory developed by the Chicago School related to the ecological theories. The theory directly links crime rates to neighborhood ecological characteristics. A core principle of social disorganization theory that state location matters. In other words, a person's residential location is a substantial factor shaping like the likelihood that the person will become involved in illegal activities. The theory suggests that among determinants of a person's later illegal activity, residential location is as significant as or more significant than the person's individual characteristics, age, gender, or race. For example, the theory suggests that youths from disadvantaged neighborhoods participate in sculpture, which approves of delinquency, and that these youths thus acquire criminality in this social and cultural setting. Next is centric zone theory. Centric zone theory model, also known as the Burgess model or CCD model, is one of the earliest theoretical models to explain urban social structure. This ring of model depict urban land usage in concentric rings. The central business district or CBD was in the middle of the model, and the city is expanded in the rings with different land uses. It was created by the sociologist Ernest Bourdieu in 1925. It influenced the later development of the Homer-Hoyt sector model 1939, the Harris and the Ullman's multiple nuclei model 1945. Next is anomy theory. Merton's anomy theory is the one of the most strive to achieve cultural recognized goals. A state of anomy develops when access to these goals is blocked to entire group of people or individuals. The result is a deviant behavior characterized by rebellion, retreat, ritualism, innovation, and or conformity. Crimes result predominantly from innovation. Conformity means acceptance or cultural goals and active adaptation of social change. Innovation means acceptance or cultural goals, non-recognition or of illegal means to achieve the goals. Ritualism Ritualism means lowering, abandoning cultural goals and maintaining legal means to achieve them. Retritivism means rejection of cultural goals and legal means. Rebellion means combating the objectives that the means of change social structure. Next is strain theory. Strain theory is a sociology proposal that pressure derives from the social factors such as lack of income or lack of quality education drives individuals to commit crime. The ideas underlying strain theory was first advanced in 1930 by American sociologist Robert K. Merton, whose work of the subject became especially influential in 1950s. Classic strain theories focus primarily on disadvantaged groups, wherein common aspirations, realizing the American dream, and the inability to achieve those goals was considered a driving factor behind crimes. Individuals whose income placed them below the poverty threshold. Next is relative deprivation theory. As defined by the social theorists and political scientists, relative deprivation theory suggests that people who feel they are being deprived of something considered essential in this society money, rights, political voice, status will organize or join social movements dedicated to obtaining the things of which they feel deprived. In some cases, relative deprivation has been cited as a factor driving incidents of social disorder like looting, terrorism, and civil wars. In this nature, social movement and their associated disorderly act can often be attributed to the grievances to people who feel they are being denied resources to which they are entitled. In proposing one of the first format definitions of relative depression, British statesman and sociologist Walter listed four required conditions. A person does not have something. The person knows other people who have the thing. The person wants to have that thing. The person believes they have a reasonable chance of getting that thing. The next is general strain theory. Key components of general strain theory include its consideration for the role of emotion in strain-derived crime and its consideration of a broad range of possible sources of societal pressure that might cause a person to commit crime. General strain theory (GST) states that strains increase the likelihood of crime, particularly strains that are high in magnitude and are seen and unjust, are associated with low social control, and create some pleasure of incentive for criminal copying. Crime is one possible response. Cultural deviance theory. Cultural deviance theory suggests that conformity to the prevailing cultural norms of lower class society causes crime. They found that violence and crime were at their worst in the middle of the city and gradually decreased the farther someone traveled from the urban center toward the suburbs. The theory of Shaw and Mackay has been further tested and expounded upon by Robert Sampson and Byron Krobs in 1989. They found that poverty, ethnic diversity, and family disruption is given localities had a strong positive correlation with the social disorganization. The next is delinquent subculture theory. In these terms, criminal or delinquent subculture denote system or norms, values, or interests that support criminal or delinquent behavior. Cohen's basic assumption is the most juvenile criminal are members of the delinquent subcultures, according to Cohen. The union of young people into subculture is a result of adjustment and status problem of their members caused by the inequality and of existing class society. The next is differential opportunity theory. That is the gist of the differential opportunity theory, which is the idea that people usually tend from low social economic background who have few opportunities to success will use any means at their disposal to achieve success. The means are generally referred to as a subculture. The means are referred to as subculture. Cowards and Oakland 1960 argues that to understand the different form that delinquent and ultimately criminal behavior can take, we must consider the different types of illegitimate opportunities available to those who seek the way out of the other class and where these opportunities lead. Drift theory. Continental drift described one of the earliest way geologists thought continents move over time. Today, the theory of continental drift has been replaced by the science of plate tectonics. Continental drift is the hypothesis that the Earth's continents have moved over geologic time relative to each other, thus appearing to have drifted across the ocean bed. The explanation that continents might have drifted the first put forward by Abraham Ortelius in 1596. The next is differential association theory. The, the differential association theory is the most talked about of the learning theories of deviance. This theory focuses on how individuals learn to become criminal, but does not concern itself with why they become criminals. Differential association is a theory developed by Edwin Sutherland, proposing that through interaction with others, individuals learn the values, attitude, techniques, and motives for criminal behavior. The principle of Sutherland theories of differential association key points. The criminal behavior is learned from the other individuals. Criminal behavior is learned in interaction with other person in the process of communication. The principal parts of the learning of criminal behavior occurs within the intimate person groups. Behavior, when the criminal behavior is learned, the learning includes the techniques of committing the crimes, which are sometimes very complicated, sometimes simple. The specific direction of motives drives rationalization and attitude. Specific direction of motives and drives is learned from definition of legal codes as favorable and unfavorable. A person become delinquent because of an excess of definition favorable to violation of law, over definition unfavorable to violation of law. Differential associations may vary in frequency, duration, priority, and extensity. The process of learning criminal behavior by association with criminal and anti-criminal patterns involves all the mechanism that are involved in any other learning. While criminal behavior is an expression of general needs, the values, it is not explained by those needs and values, since non-criminal behavior is an expression of a same needs and values. The next is contentment theory. The theory contains that a series of external social factors and external qualities effectively insulate certain individuals from criminal involvement, even when illogical variables induce other to engage in crime. Although initially promising, the theory was criticized by some criminologists for various weaknesses. However, the theory has been subjected to very few empirical tests, and therefore the relative strength of its various propositions have never been properly established. The next is social band theory. Social banding theory is a control theory built upon the assumption that people are inherently self-interested. Therefore, it seeks to explain why some people refrain from crime rather than engage in crime. The theory posits that offending behavior is caused by weakened or broken social bonds with law-abiding people and institutions. Social bonds consist of four elements: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. And the presence of each element facilitates law-abiding behavior. The next is social reaction, labeling theory. Labeling theory posits that self-identity and the behavior of individuals may be determined or influenced by the terms used to describe or classify them. Labeling theory holds that deviance is not inherent in an act, but instead focuses on the tendency of majorities to negatively label minorities of those seen as deviant from standard cultural norms. Thomas G. Skep states labeling also plays a part with the mentally ill, and label does not refer to the criminal but rather acts that are not usually socially accepted due to the mental disorders. The last is primary and secondary deviance. Primary deviance basically refers to the initial act of deviance. In other words, this is the first stage of deviant behavior at this stage. The deviant goes relatively unnoticed and there is little social reaction or mild corrective actions. This is very common in society, and most of us may have been taking part in this stage. For example, teenagers smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol with their friends is primary deviance. Although teenagers' use of substance goes against social norms, it mostly goes unpunished. Secondary deviance refers to the deviant behavior that is the result of being publicity labeled as deviant and treated as an outsider. Secondary deviance is actually a result of other people's negative reaction to the original primary deviance. For example, imagine a young child who gets caught stealing a candy bar. If other around him call him names and excludes him from social activities, labeling him as a thief, the child will be eventually consider himself a thief and act accordingly. If corrective measures were taken in a primary deviant itself, and if there were labeling and isolating the child initial act of stealing would only be primary deviance. The fourth topic is economic theories of crime causation. Under it, under the economic theories of crime causation is economic model of crime behavior basic theory. It states that the economic theory of criminal behavior is an application of a neoclassical theory of demand, formalized by Nobel laureate Gary Becker in 1968. It states that potential criminals are economically rational and respond significantly to the deterring incentives by the criminal justice system. The next is Karl Marx theory. Marx wrote that the power relationship between capitalist and a worker were inherently exploitative and will be inevitably create class conflict. He believed that this conflict would ultimately lead to the revolution in which the working class would overthrow the capitalist class and seize control of the economy. The next is the Friedrich Engels and the William Burger theory. Friedrich Engels, as an early age, Engels, Engels developed a profound sense of cynicism toward major societal institutions like religion. William Burger believed that a causal link between crime and economic and social conditions. He asserted that crime is a social in origin and a normal response to prevailing cultural conditions in more primitive societies. He contended the survival requires more selfless altruism within the community. The fifth, the fifth, the fourth, the fourth topic, the fourth, the fifth, the fifth, the fifth topic is biopsychology, social theories of crime causation. Biopsychosocial model of crime causation. Biosociology, social criminology, and psychology is a multidisciplinary perspective and that attempts to understand criminal behavior and related outcomes like antisocial behavior and its consequences. By considering the interaction between biological, genetic hormones, psy- physiology, brain structure, functioning, psychological and sociological factors, biosocial criminology is an emerging field within criminology dealing with biological, psychological and social factors, and the interaction between these sets of factors as explanations to crime. The next is moral insanity and criminal responsibility. The term moral insanity was introduced by the Pritchard to describe a madness consisting in a morbid prevention of the natural feelings, affections, inclinations, tempered habits, moral dispositions, and natural impulses without any remarkable disorder or defect of the interest or knowing the reasoning faculties, and particularly without any insane illusion or hallucinations. The term criminal responsibility refers to a person's ability to understand his or her conduct at the time a crime is committed. Laws define crimes in terms of an act or omission, actus reus, and the mental states, means reus. Criminal responsibility relates to the mental states of a crime. The next is premenstrual syndrome. Premenstrual syndrome PMS is a combination of symptoms that many women get about a week or two before their period. Most women over 90% see they got some premenstrual symptoms such as bloating, headaches, and moodiness. Researcher, Researchers think that PMS happens in the day after ovulation because estrogen and progesterone levels begin falling dramatically if you are not pregnant. Symptoms go away within the few days after a woman's period starts as hormone level begins rising again. Battered child syndrome, a disease in which children are physically abused. The battered child syndrome is a form of child abuse. Child abuse involves a complex and dangerous set of problems that include child neglect and the physical, emotional, and sexual abuse of children. Next is child neglect is the most frequently reported form of child abuse that the most lethal. Physical neglect includes refusal or delay in seeking healthcare, abandonment, impulsion from the home, or refusal to allow a runaway to return home, and inadequate supervision. Educational neglect includes the allowance of a chronic truancy, failure to enroll a child of mandatory school age in school, a failure to attend to a special education need. Emotional neglect includes such action as marked inattention to the child needs for affection, refusal of or failure to provide needed psychological care, spouse abuse in the child's presence, and permission of drug or alcohol used by the child. Physical abuse defined as a physical injury inflicted upon the child with cruel and or malicious intent. Physical abuse can be a result of punching, beating, kicking, biting, burning, shaking, or otherwise harming a child. Emotionally abuse includes act or omission by the parents or other caregivers that could cause serious behavioral, emotional, and mental disorder. Next is sexual abuse, believed to be the most underreported type of child maltreatment because of the secrecy or conspiracy of child silence. That so often characterize these cases include fondling a child genitals, intercourse, incest, rape, sodomy, inhibitism, and commercial exploitation through prostitution or production of pornographic materials. Battered woman syndrome, the set of symptoms, injuries, and signs of mistreatment seen in a woman who has been repeatedly abused by a spouse, partner, or relative. In 1970s, Battered woman syndrome began being used as a lethal defense to explain the mental states of women who killed their abusers. Postpartum postpartum stress syndrome and a postpartum psychosis. Postpartum depression is a fairly common condition that can impact new moms. The hallmark symptoms of PPD: overwhelming sadness, feeling of homelessness, worthlessness, and low self-esteem. But what you might not know is that the new moms can experience PPD-like symptoms without actually having the disorder. Depression and anxiety, coined to describe women who fall somewhere between suffering from the baby blues and an actual diagnosis of postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, a condition that can cause women to feel constantly anxious to the point where it interferes with their lives. Women who suffer from postpartum stress syndrome have a huge feeling of self-doubt mixed with an intense desire to be a perfect mom. Clement explained that they can feel seriously stressed out as a result. The last topic of the theories of crime causation is a political social conflict theories of crime causation. The first belong belong the political social conflict theories of crime causation is Marxist criminology. Marxist criminology is one of the school of criminology. It parallels the work of sculptural functionalism school which focuses on what produces stability and constitutionality in society. But unlike the functionalist, it adapts as a predefined political philosophy. Marxist criminology is a theory that attempts to explain crime through the prism of Marxism. Marxist criminology says during the struggle for resources in capitalism, crime emerges and as those on the bottom contend for social, political, and economic equality. The next is conflict theory. Conflict theory focuses on the competition between groups within society over limited resources. Conflict theory views social and economic institutions as tools the struggle between groups or classes used to maintain inequality and the dominance of ruling class. The next is social reality of crime. Under the theory of social reality crime, crime is held to be legal definition of human conduct created by agents of dominant class in the politically organized society. Definition of crime are in turn applied by the class that has the power to shape the enforcement and administration of the criminal law. The next is left realism. Left realism is just one political ideology that focuses on the causes of crime and deviance. Left realists believe that living in the capitalistic society, as in a society where private entities control trade and industry instead of the state, is the main causes of crime. Left realists believe that main causes of crime are marginalization, relative depression, and subculture, and emphasize community-oriented programmers for controlling and reducing crime. The next is postmodern theory. Jean-Francois Lyotard defined philosophical postmodernism in the postmodern condition. Writing simplifying to extreme, I define postmodern as incredulity towards narratives, where the what he means by meta narrative is something like a unified, complete, universal, and estimatically certain story about some everything that is. Philosopher John Deeply has argued for the conscientious claim that the label postmodern for thinkers such as Derrida et al. In Premature. Institutive, institutive and constitutive theory. In sociology and organizational studies, institutional theory is a theory on the deeper and more resilient aspect of social structure. It considers the processes by which structure, including shame, role, norms, and routines, become established as authoritative guidelines for social behavior. Scott 2008 institutional theory is a widely accepted theoretical poster and emphasizes productive ethics and legitimacy. Kraft Public Policy and 2017 institutional theory is a policy making the emphasize the formal and legal aspect of government structure. Constitutive theory is a philosophical analysis of the logical interconnection between actors, their actions, and the social practices within which they perform this. It draws on the insight from the later work of as Ludwig Wittgenstein, as developed and extended by the Peter Witz and John Scarlett. Conservatism and liberatism. Conservatism is an aesthetic, cultural, and social and political philosophy which seeks to promote and to preserve traditional social institutions. The central tenets of the conservatism may vary in relative to the traditional values or practices of the culture and civilization in which it appears. Liberalism with the proper institution and diplomacy, liberal believe that state can work together to maximize prosperity and minimize conflict. Liberalism is one of the main schools of the international relation theory. Liberalization comes from the Latin liber meaning free, referred originally to philosophy of freedom. Radicalism. Radical theory is an obsolete scientific theory in chemistry describing the structure of organic compounds. In this theory, organic compounds were thought to exist as combination of radicals that has been exchanged in chemical reactions, just as chemical elements could be interchanged in inorganic compounds. Louis Bernard may introduced the phrase radical in 1985, and the phrase was employed by Antoine Lavoisier in 1789 in his Traité élémentaire de chimie. Identify the fusion theory. Identity fusion theory posits that strongly focused individuals feel kin-like bonds with other group members, even ones with whom they may have had little or on contact. Several studies have gathered empirical support for the rational ties principle. The identity fusion construct builds upon earlier work by emphasizing aspect of the relationship of the people to groups that were de-emphasized within the social identity perspective, social identity theory, and self-categorization theory. And that's all, ma'am. Thank you.